Welcome to the Ultimate Sports Blog Podcast. Today is Monday, November 19th, 2018. Today I'm going to recap yesterday's NFL games, look at tonight's Chiefs-Rams game, NBA, NHL, college basketball. We'll go over all of those and look ahead to tonight's slate of games in those sports. We have some college basketball going on right now as we speak. We'll get to that a little bit. We'll do guess the lines for week 13 of college football, which begins tomorrow night. I'll do my MLB offseason predictions, and then I'm going to do my best bet of the night. All right, here we go. NFL yesterday, the Giants defeat the Bucs 38-35. Giants actually had a 31-14 lead going into the fourth quarter, but Ryan Fitzpatrick gets benched for Jameis Winston, and Bucs make it a little interesting, and the Giants offense just wasn't stopped by the Bucs defense, and they go to 3-7, as well as the Buccaneers. Eli Manning, 17 of 18, 231 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jameis Winston, 12 of 16, 199 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick off the bench. Ryan Fitzpatrick was awful, 167 yards and 3 picks, 13 of 21. The Ravens defeat the Bengals 24-21 without Joe Flacco. Lamar Jackson made the start. They're 5-5, so is Cincinnati. Andy Dalton, 19 of 36, 211 yards and 2 touchdowns. Lamar Jackson, 13 of 19, 150 yards and an interception. And he had a lot of rushing attempts too. 117 yards on the ground on 27 carries. That's pretty darn good. Kind of reminds me of a little bit of like an RG3 type of quarterback. And it's funny because RG3 is on their roster. The Lions defeat the Panthers 20-19. Lions go to 4-6. Carolina goes to 6-4. Matt Stafford, 23 of 37, 220 yards and a touchdown. Cam Newton, 25 of 37, 357 yards, 3 touchdowns and a pick. Carolina scores a touchdown with minute 7 to go. They go for 2 in the win and they fail. And Detroit holds on for that game. Colts defeat the Titans 38-10. Nice win for Indy to get back to 500 at 5-5. Tennessee drops to 5-5. Andrew Luck, 23 of 29, 297 yards and 3 touchdowns. Blaine Gabbert was in this game most of the time because Marcus Mariota got hurt. 118 yards, 11 of 16 with a touchdown and a pick. Marcus Mariota was 10 for 13, 85 yards and a pick. The Falcons dropped to the Cowboys 22-19. Big win for Dallas to get back to 500 at 5-5. Atlanta goes to 4-6. Dak Prescott, 22 of 32, 208 yards. Matt Ryan, 24 of 34, 291 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. The Steelers defeat the Jags 20-16. Big comeback win for Pittsburgh, down 16-0. Come all the way back to get the win over struggling Jacksonville. Ben Roethlisberger, 27 of 47, 314 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 picks. As they go to 7-2. Jacksonville drops to 3-7. They're done. Blake Bortles, 10 of 18, 104 yards. He was atrocious. The Broncos defeat the Chargers 23-22. The Broncos are 4-6. The Chargers are 7-3. Case Keenum, 19 of 32, 205 yards. Phillip Rivers, 28 of 43, 401 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks. The Raiders defeat the Cardinals 23-21. The Raiders 2-8. The Cardinals 2-8. Derek Carr, 19 of 31, 192 yards and 2 touchdowns. Josh Rosen, 9 of 20, 136 yards, 3 touchdowns and 2 picks. He was bad. The Saints absolutely destroy the Eagles, 48-7. The Saints are 9-1, and the Eagles drop to 4-6. Drew Brees, 22 of 30, 363 yards and 4 touchdowns. Carson Wentz, 19 of 33, 156 yards and 3 picks. The Bears defeat the Vikings 25-20. Big win for the Bears to get to 7-3. Minnesota drops to 5-4-1. Mitch Trubisky, 20 of 31, 165 yards, a touchdown, 2 picks. Kirk Cousins, 30 of 46, 262 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks. Tonight we have what could be the game of the year between the Chiefs and the Rams. Both teams are 9-1. I do think the Rams will win this game. I think this will be a shootout. It's back in Los Angeles, and I said it on the podcast last few days. Whether it's Los Angeles or Mexico City, the Rams are the pick to win this game. I think they are the better team. The loss of Cooper Kupp hurts. I think Josh Reynolds will do a nice job in his absence. I just think the difference in this game is that the Rams have a few more playmakers on defense than the Chiefs, such as Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh in their front seven. And I think that's the difference in tonight's game, as I do think that there's going to be some high scoring in the game. But the better quarterback's obviously Patrick Mahomes. The better running back is Todd Gurley. Better receiving core, I think it's a push now with Cooper Kupp out. The Chiefs have the better tight end than Travis Kelce. The better defense, I say, is the Rams because of the presence of Suh and Donald. So I like the Rams tonight in their home stadium. NBA yesterday, some interesting results, only a few games on the slate. The Grizzlies defeat the Timberwolves 100-87 on the road. Good win for Memphis to get to 10-5. Minnesota drops to 7-10. The Magic defeat the Knicks 131-117. The Magic 9-8, a very surprising 9-8, and the Knicks dropped to 4-13. The Lakers defeat the Heat 113-97. Lakers are 9-7. Miami 6-10. The Blazers defeat the Wizards 119-109. Blazers 11-5. Washington 5-11. The Spurs upset the Warriors 104-92. Actually, it's not an upset. San Antonio is favored as they go to 8-7 on the year. Golden State drops to 12-6. Tonight we have a couple games. You have at 7 o'clock Celtics Hornets. That's an interesting game. Cavs Pistons. The Pistons should be able to take care of business. Jazz Pacers, no Victor Oladipo for Indiana. NBA TV has a terrible game. Suns Sixers. They're probably just showing it because Jimmy Butler is playing in that game, and it's his fourth game as a Sixer. As the Sixers look to go to 3-1 since the Jimmy Butler trade, or in games that Jimmy Butler has played, I should say, because they lost to Miami after the trade, but he wasn't with the team yet. Clippers Hawks, is this a trap game for the Clippers? I say no. I think they find the way. The Hawks are very bad. I think they're the second worst team in the NBA behind the Cavaliers. So I wouldn't expect the Clippers to look past them, even though it makes sense for it because first game on the East Coast, and I could just see the Clippers without that much talent on their team, although I like their team, but they don't have a superstar on their team. So that kind of makes me nervous in that spot. So that's a 7:30 game. 8 o'clock, you have the Mavs and the Grizzlies. Letdown spot for Memphis against the somewhat overachieving Mavericks team. After that win in Minnesota, I'm going to say no. I like Memphis at home there. Nuggets Bucks is a nice one, although the Nuggets have faltered after their hot start. Milwaukee's been unbelievable. Giannis Antetokounmpo is your MVP favorite right now. The Spurs and the Pelicans, is this a letdown for the Spurs after their big win against Golden State? I say emphatic yes. They don't have Anthony Davis on their team, and the Pelicans do. 10 o'clock NBA TV, the Thunder and the Kings. Speaking of trap games, I think this is the most likely team to get upset unexpectedly tonight, and that's the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're only a 3-point favorite in Sacramento. De'Aaron Fox, I think, is the most improved player in the Western Conference. Someone name me a more improved player in the West than De'Aaron Fox. He's really kept the Kings afloat with an overachieving record of 8-8. Hockey, like the NBA, not many games on last night's slate. The Stars defeated the Islanders 6-2. Impressive win for Dallas. They go to 11-7-2. Islanders dropped to 10-7-2. Number one star of the game with 2 goals and assist. Alexander Radulov, the number 2 star of the game with a goal and 2 assists. Tyler Seguin, number 3 star of the game with 3 assists. Jamie Benn. The Hurricanes defeat the Devils 2-1. Much needed win for Carolina. They go to 9-8-3. New Jersey drops to 8-9-2. Number 1 star of the game with a goal, Justin Williams. The number 2 star of the game with 33 saves on 34 shots. Backup goaltender Curtis McKinney. And the number 3 star of the game with an assist, Jordan Staal. The Blackhawks defeat the Wild 3-1, and much needed win for the Chicago Blackhawks to get right a little bit. They've lost a couple in a row since they fired Joe Quenneville, so this was a much needed win at home to get to 8-5. Minnesota dropped to 12-7-2. Number 1 started the game with 39 saves on 40 shots, Corey Crawford. Number 2 started the game with a goal, Brandon Saad. And number 3 started the game with 2 assists, Patrick Kane. The Golden Knights defeated the Oilers 6-3, an impressive win for Vegas, a much-needed one, too, to go to 9-11-1. Edmonton falls below 500 to go to 9-10-1. Number 1 started the game with 2 goals and an assist, Jonathan Marchessault. Number 2 started the game with 3 assists, Colin Miller. And the number 3 started the game with a goal, Connor McDavid. The Avalanche defeat the Ducks 4-3 in overtime. The Avs go to 10-6-4. Ducks drop to 8-9-5. Number 1 started the game with a goal and 2 assists, Mikko Rantanen. The number 2 started the game with the goal and 2 assists, Brandon Montour. And the number 3 started the game with a goal and 2 assists, Nathan MacKinnon. Tonight's slate's a little bigger. At 7 o'clock, you have the Stars and the Rangers. Stars, I could see this being a little bit of a letdown spot. Usually a team that wins at the Islanders and has the back-to-back at the Rangers has lost. See the Montreal Canadiens from a few weeks ago, and then there was somebody else recently. I think it might have actually been the San Jose Sharks that won at the Islanders and then lost at the Rangers. There's 2 teams on the back-to-back had the Islanders, Rangers, but beat the Islanders and lost to the Rangers or lost to both. But Rangers have been playing great hockey of late, 10-8-2 on the year, and certainly you can make a case they're the most surprising team in the Eastern Conference right now. Ottawa's fallen off a little bit. Montreal's been surprisingly good too, so maybe they're the second biggest surprise in the East, maybe third if you still count Ottawa, even though they're sub 500. Blue Jackets Maple Leafs is a good game between 2 teams that should be playoff teams. Sabres Penguins is a nice one too. Good opportunity for Buffalo to make a statement against a struggling Penguins team that's under 500 right now. Capitals, Canadians. Caps have been Jekyll and Hyde. Canadians have, I think, been the biggest surprise in the East. Although, like I said, you can make a case for the Rangers or Ottawa, but to me it's Montreal. And also at 7:30 you have the Panthers at the Senators. Senators are actually 9-8-3, so they are above 500. That's my mistake. So there's 3 teams in the East that you could argue have been the biggest surprise in that conference. And like I said, Rangers, Habs, Sens. And then the Panthers, I think, have been among one of the biggest disappointments in the East and certainly in the NHL so far this year. Because many people thought that was going to be a playoff team before the year. They have a lot of talent on that roster. And they probably made a huge mistake in firing Gerard Gallant a few years ago. 8 o'clock, you have the Kings and the Blues, 2 struggling teams from the West. Best game of the night, the Lightning at the Predators. Possible Stanley Cup final preview. These 2 teams played a few weeks ago, and Pekka Rinne was the star of the show, had about 40 saves, and only gave up 1 goal in Tampa Bay in a 4-1 win. 9 o'clock, you have the Golden Knights and the Flames. Golden Knights are getting back on track a little bit. They got a big win last night, maybe let down the night. We'll see. And then 10 o'clock's a nice one, too. You have the Jets at the Canucks. The Canucks have been surprisingly decent, but they've dropped to 10-10-2 after being above 500 for a little while. And then Winnipeg has quietly been playing good hockey of late. College basketball, I'm just going to zip through the scores. I'm not going to go through the records because I'm short on time. Myrtle Beach, Wake defeats Valpo 69-63. Charleston, Ball State defeats App State 94-86 overtime. Holy Cross defeats Siena 57-45 in the Air Force Hall of Fame tip-off. Bahamas Showcase, North Dakota State defeats Towson 76-51. Jamaica Classic, Georgetown defeats South Florida 76-73 in overtime. Johnny Bach Classic, FIU defeats Youngstown State 102-93. Texas Arlington defeats UC Davis 68-59. Evansville defeats Texas Southern 85-63. In Myrtle Beach, CSU Fullerton defeats Monmouth 87-63. Brown Bears tip-off, UMass Lowell defeats Sacred Heart 94-90. Charleston, Alabama defeats Wichita State 90-86. Air Force tip-off from Mohegan Sun. Number 18 Michigan defeated Providence 66-47. Buckeye Classic, Ohio State defeats South Carolina State 89-61. Battle for Atlanta's campus game, Oklahoma defeats Wofford 75-64. Delaware Invitational, Delaware defeats Wilmington, Delaware 70-40. Battle in the Blue Ridge, Wilmington defeats Allen 113-74. St. Francis, Brooklyn defeats Lafayette 84-72. Navy defeats Bryant 83-79. NC Central kills Warren Wilson 123-57. Bahamas Showcase, FAU defeats Incarnate Word 71-68. Jamaica Classic, Campbell defeats Austin Peay 78-72. Barclays Center Campus Game, Troy defeats Central Arkansas 82-77. Hardwood Showcase, Arkansas defeats Indiana 73-72. That was a game at Arkansas's campus. The NKU Men's Basketball Tournament, Manhattan defeats Asheville 54-38. Bimini Jam Air Force defeats South Dakota 65-62. Maryland defeats Mount St. Mary's 92-77. Oklahoma State defeats Charleston 58. Southern Utah defeats Seattle 73-70. Brown defeats Army 86-66 in the Brown Bears tip-off. Kent State defeats Alcorn State 79-48 in the Commodore Classic. Myrtle Beach, West Virginia defeats St. Joe's 97-90. Air Force tip-off in Mohegan Sun, South Carolina defeats George Washington 90-55. That's an impressive win for the Gamecocks. South Alabama Tournament, Jacksonville defeats Chattanooga 74-66. Fordham defeats Columbia 70-69. Sanford defeats Cleveland State 73-60 in the Buckeye Classic. UAB defeats West Alabama 77-47. Pepperdine defeats Miami of Ohio 86-80 in the Island of the Bahamas Showcase. Holiday Hoops Showcase, Idaho defeats Bethesda 87-59. Paradise Jam, Missouri defeats Oregon State 69-63. Number 11, Michigan State destroys Tennessee Tech 101-33. Number 10, Kentucky defeats VMI 92-82. Davidson defeats Northeastern 71-59 in the Charleston Classic. Central Michigan defeats San Jose State 76-74 in the Januco Jam. Jamaica Classic, Loyola Marymount defeats Ohio 65-56. Northern Kentucky defeats Coastal Carolina 83-89. UCF defeats Western Kentucky 78-62 in the Myrtle Beach Championship game. Paradise Jam, number 12, Kansas State defeats Penn 64-48. San Francisco defeats LIU Brooklyn 84-52. Washington defeats Santa Clara 82-68 in the Vancouver Showcase. Georgia Southern defeats Montana 80-77 in the Bahamas Showcase. Number 16, Virginia Tech defeats number 23, Purdue 89-83 in the Charleston Classic Championship. CSU Bakersfield defeats Weber State 68-67. Central Connecticut State defeats Florida A&M 89-75 in the Jamaica Classic. Hawaii defeats Northern Arizona 85-68. And Minnesota defeats Texas A&M 69-64 in the Vancouver Showcase. Today, a couple games in the books already. I'm going to go over the results real quick. Number 16, Clemson defeats Akron 72-69. Tulane defeats South Dakota State 84-80. Paradise Jam, Eastern Kentucky defeats Kennesaw State 100-81. Cayman Island Classics, Georgia defeats Illinois State 80-68. UC Irvine defeats UTSA 65-56 in the Gulf Coast Showcase. Utah Valley defeats Hartford 72-65 in the MGM Resorts main event. Going on right now in the Maui Invitational, number 8 Auburn currently up on Xavier 50-46 in the second half. Good for Xavier hanging around with the top 10 team in Auburn. Paradise Jam in the first half. Northern Iowa on top of Old Dominion 21-18. 4 o'clock you have Sam Houston State and Jackson State in the Cayman Islands Classic. 4:30 ESPN 2, a huge game. Number 1 Duke against San Diego State. 5 o'clock, St. Bonaventure and Georgia State in the Cayman Islands. Long Beach State, Iona, and MGM Resorts. Gulf Coast, you have Colorado State and Louisiana. Hampton, Bowling Green in the Gotprint.com Legends Classic. 5:30, Oregon State and Penn in the Paradise Jam. Bimini Jam, 6 o'clock, High Point Air Force. 6:30, FS1, Loyola Chicago and Richmond in the Fort Myers tip-off. 7 o'clock, ESPNU, Missouri State and Nebraska in the Hall of Fame Classic. 7 o'clock, Big Ten Network, Eastern Michigan and Rutgers in the Hub City Classic. 7 o'clock ACC Network, number 14 Florida State against Canisius. 7 o'clock ESPN2, St. John's and Cal in the GotPrint.com Legends Classic from the Barclays Center. Rio Grande in East Carolina, Coppin State Rider, Arkansas Pine Bluff and UMass in the Continental Tire Las Vegas Holiday Invitational, and it's a campus game. Sunny Otana against Albany, Binghamton and Colgate in the New York Hoops Classic. Robert Morris and Stetson, Longwood Charlotte, Western Michigan Cincinnati, NC18 Marshall, Prairie View and Greensboro, Chicago State and East Tennessee State in the Cayman Islands Classic. Oakland hosts Defiance, St. Elizabeth at Delaware State, 7:30 Cayman Islands Classic, Boise State and Creighton. Florida Gulf Coast and Toledo in the Gulf Coast Showcase. Trinity Baptist and Charleston Southern. Loyola, Maryland and Detroit Mercy in the GotPrint.com Legends Classic. It's a sub-regional game. Paradise Jam, number 12, Kansas State and Missouri. 8 o'clock on the ACC Network, number 7, North Carolina hosts St. Francis of Pennsylvania. Liberty Vanderbilt in the Commodore Classic. Northwestern State against Houston, the Men Against Breast Cancer Classic. Little Rock Tulsa in the Holiday Invitational. Southeast Missouri State and South Alabama in the South Alabama Tournament. Howard and South Illinois. Ecclesia and Oral Roberts. Lamar hosts Arlington Baptist. 8:30 St. Mary's against Utah State in the MGM Resorts main event. UMBC South Dakota in the Bimini Jam. 9 o'clock FS1 Wyoming and Boston College and Fort Myers tip-off. ESPNU 9 o'clock Arizona and Iowa State from Maui. That's a nice one. See where those two schools are at. Cal Poly Washington State. East New Mexico and UTEP. 9 o'clock as well. Idaho State and Testeda. 9:30 ESPN2 Hall of Fame Classic. USC Texas Tech. Temple VCU and the GotPrint.com. Portland hosts Lewis and Clark. That's a 10 o'clock game. Number 6 Nevada hosts Cal Baptist. 11 o'clock ESPNU. You have Mississippi State. Number 15 Mississippi State against Arizona State in the MGM Resorts main event. Number 17 UCLA hosts Presbyterian. And last but not least, 11:30 in the Maui Invitational, you have number 3 Gonzaga against Illinois. So an interesting slate for today. Now I'm going to do guest the lines for week 13 of the college football season. As I do each and every week, I'm just going to zip through this very quickly. Ball State at Miami of Ohio tomorrow night. I have Miami of Ohio by 6.5. They're favored by 17. Wow. Northern Illinois at Western Michigan. I have Western Michigan by 3.5. They're laying 5.5. Thursday, Colorado State at Air Force. I have Air Force minus 7. They're favored by 14.5. Mississippi State at Ole Miss. I have Mississippi State by 6.5. They're favored by 11. Friday, Texas at Kansas. I have Texas by 16.5. They're favored by 15. Close there. Nebraska at Iowa. I have Iowa by 15.5. They're favored by only 8. Akron at Ohio. I have Ohio by 12.5. They're favored by 22. Buffalo at Bowling Green. I have Buffalo by 17. They're favored by 14.5. Central Michigan at Toledo. I have Toledo by 14.5. They're favored by 18.5. Eastern Michigan at Kent State. I have Eastern by 8. Eastern's by 13.5. Houston at Memphis. I have Memphis by 5. Memphis is by 8. Arkansas at Missouri. I have Mizzou by 15.5. Mizzou's by 21. Coastal Carolina at South Alabama. I have Coastal Carolina by 10.5. They're only favored by 2. East Carolina at Cincinnati. I have Cincinnati by 17.5. They're favored by 18, so a half point off. Virginia at Virginia Tech. I almost said 4, but I went with 3.5. It's 4. So I would have nailed that pick, but a bad job by me by not sticking with my first gut choice. Oregon at Oregon State. I have Oregon by 14. They're favored by 14.5. UCF at South Florida. I have UCF by 14.5. They're favored by 13.5. Oklahoma at West Virginia. Friday night, I have the Sooners by 6. The Mountaineers are a 1-point favorite. The line opened at 2.5 in favor of Oklahoma. Now West Virginia is laying 1. There's reports that Rodney Anderson is out for this game for the Sooners. That's a loss for their offense. Maybe it's just the Mountaineers at home. But my point is that Oklahoma's owned West Virginia, it feels like, these last couple years. So I thought that Vegas was going to give an edge to the Sooners on the road, but hey, maybe they like the Mountaineers more than I thought. Washington at Washington State, I have the Cougars by 7. They're favored by only 3. Saturday, the game, Michigan at Ohio State. I have the Wolverines by 3. They're favored by 4. Georgia Tech at Georgia. I have Georgia by 17.5. They're favored by 17. Syracuse at Boston College. I have BC by 7.5. They're favored by 7. Florida at Florida State. I had a hard time picking this line. I have Gators by 2.5. The Gators are favored by 5. Next up is Marshall at FIU. I have FIU by 7. FIU is getting a point at home against Marshall. Western Kentucky at Louisiana Tech. I have Tech by 18. They're favored by 11. Baylor at Texas Tech from Arlington. I have Texas Tech by 6. They're favored by 7. Purdue at Indiana. I have Purdue by 6.5. They're only favored by 4. Navy at Tulane. I have Tulane by 7.5. They're favored by 7. NC State at North Carolina. I have NC State by 10.5. They're favored by 6. Wake Forest at Duke. I have Duke by 7. They're favored by 13. That's a lot. Old Dominion at Rice. I have Old Dominion by 8.5. They're favored by 10. New Mexico State at Liberty. I have Liberty 5-5. They're favored by 9. Georgia Southern at Georgia State. I have Southern by 14.5. They're favored by 12. Wyoming at New Mexico. I was way off on this one. I said New Mexico by 3. Wyoming's favored by 7.5. Troy at Appalachian State. I have Appalachian State by 8. App State's favored by 11. Southern Miss at UTEP. I was close here. I said 12.5 for Southern, and they're laying 13. Louisiana at UL Monroe. I have UL Monroe as an 8-point favorite over their in-state rivals, and guess what? They're only laying 3. UAB at Middle Tennessee. I have Middle by 2.5. UAB's favored by 2.5. Stanford at UCLA. I have Stanford by 3. Stanford's giving 5. Auburn at Alabama. I have Alabama by 24.5, and that's what the line is. I feel like I've nailed every Alabama line correct this year. I don't know what it is, but I feel like every time I guessed an Alabama line, I've got it right. Maryland at Penn State by 20. They're only favored by 13.5. Illinois at Northwestern. I have Northwestern by 23.5. They're only favored by 18. Arizona State at Arizona. I have the Wildcats by 4.5. The Sun Devils are actually favored by 2. Minnesota at Wisconsin. I have Wisconsin by 16.5. They're only favored by 10. I think that's because of Alec Corybrook possibly not playing. Pitt at Miami. I have Miami by 3. Miami's favored by 5.5. SMU at Tulsa. I have SMU by 12.5. They're only favored by 2. Temple at UConn. I have Temple by 17. Temple's favored by 29. Arkansas State at Texas State. I have Arkansas State by 13. They're favored by 13.5. I was close there. Rutgers at Michigan State. I have Michigan State by 27.5. They're favored by 27. I was close there. Tennessee at Vandy. I have Vandy by 3. They're favored by 3.5. I was off by a half point on a lot of these. FAU, I have as a 15.5-point favorite over Charlotte. They're favored by 18. South Carolina at Clemson. I have Clemson by 28.5. They're favored by 25. Kansas State at Iowa State. I have Iowa State by 13.5. They're favored by 14. Yet another game where I was half point off. Kentucky at Louisville. I have Kentucky by 14.5. They're favored by 17.5. San Jose State at Fresno State. I have Fresno State by 34. They're favored by 31. Colorado at Cal. I have Cal by 7. Cal's favored by 12.5. I think that's a little high. Even though that the Buffaloes just fired Mike McIntyre. North Texas at UTSA. I have North Texas by 15. They're favored by 21.5. LSU at Texas A&M. I have LSU by 4. Guess what? A&M's favored by 2.5. I think that's a little nuts because I think LSU is the better team, but maybe they think that A&M rises to the occasion at home. I remember LSU won a big game in A&M on Thanksgiving night a few years ago. It was when Orgeron was trying to get that intern tag removed. I believe that was 2 years ago. Notre Dame at USC has to be the most fascinating game of the weekend because USC still hasn't fired Clay Helton. I have a feeling that's inevitable. But here's the thing. If they win this game, they might actually keep Clay Helton. Notre Dame I have as a 14-point road favorite at the Coliseum. It's hard to believe that USC is a double-digit home underdog, but that's the case here, as the Trojans have underachieved this year, and they are getting 11 at home, so I was 3 points off there. Oklahoma State at TCU, I have the Cowboys by 3, and the Cowboys are favored by 4.5. I thought there's a chance that TCU would actually be favored, but I gave the minus to the Cowboys. Nevada at UNLV, I have Nevada by 7. Nevada is favored by 13. BYU at Utah, I have Utah by 16. Utah's by 13.5. Utah State at Boise State, I have Boise by 7. Boise's favored by only 3. They're giving a lot of respect to the Aggies of Utah State. And they deserve it, because they only have one loss. And their one loss came against Michigan State in a very close game, and they could have won that game. If they won at Michigan State, they'd be, in my opinion, the favorite to play in a New Year's Six Bowl over UCF, because a win over Michigan State would have been better than any win UCF has, unless you think Cincinnati's better than Michigan State, which you can make a case for. They've had a better season than Michigan State. That's for sure. And last but not least, San Diego State hosts Hawaii. I have San Diego State by 22.5, and they're favored by only 16. All right, that's guess the lines for this week. Now I'm going to do my updated MLB offseason predictions. I'm going to start with free agency, and then I'm going to do trades. I made some changes from the predictions I made a few weeks back because of other moves that have been made or some rumors that I've heard through sources and whatnot and people I trust. So the best free agent on the market, who I think is the best free agent in the history of baseball, unless you could consider Albert Pujols in 2011, but the case against Pujols is that he really didn't turn out to what the Angels expected. But Bryce Harper might be the best free agent in baseball history, and arguably one of the best free agents in the history of sports, behind Peyton Manning in 2012, Drew Brees in whatever year he signed with the Saints. I think that was 2006. LeBron James a couple times, and then Kevin Durant. So Bryce Harper right now, if gunpoint, my prediction, the Philadelphia Phillies. I originally had the Yankees, but I'm going to change my pick here. Although I'm still tempted to say the Yankees because there's all the connections and how he grew up as a Yankee fan, and I know how bad he wants to play for the Yankees, but they have a surplus of outfielders, and I think the Phillies are going to be more desperate to get Bryce on their team. So that's my pick. And speaking of the Yankees, I have them signing Manny Machado. So basically I flipped Bryce Harper and Manny Machado's picks. I originally had Machado to the Phillies and Harper to the Yankees, but I'm going to switch it. And the case for Machado to the Yankees is that he also wants to play in pinstripes. The Yankees have a hole at shortstop until Didi Gregorius returns from injury. You can, in theory, put Gleyber Torres at his original position, but I think the Yankees are motivated and they really like Machado and they want to spend their money. They got under the tax for this free agent class in particular, and this is their case for Harper too, in theory, but they have a need in the infield more so than the outfield. So my gut tells me that they sign him to play shortstop until Gregorius comes back, and then they move him to third and either make Miguel Andujar their DH or stick him in left field. But if they make him their DH, then they put Giancarlo Stanton in left field unless they sign Bryce Harper. And then that would make some interesting roster decisions for them if they ended up signing both guys. But Bryce Harper to Philadelphia, Manny Machado to the Yankees. Patrick Corbin, this pick hasn't changed. I have him going to the Yankees. I think that they, like I said, are motivated to spend money. They want to upgrade their rotation more than anything. Brian Cashman came out and said that he wants 2 elite arms to go with Luis Severino and Masahiro Tanaka, and I think Patrick Corbin, coming off a career year, will be a guy that the Yankees pursue heavily and end up signing. Dallas Keuchel. I originally had him going back to the Houston Astros. I really don't feel as strongly about that, but there's an argument to be made there because Lance McCullers Jr. is going to be out for the season with Tommy John surgery for next year, so they suddenly have a huge need for starting pitching. But instead, I'm going to say he ends up signing with the Philadelphia Phillies. They have the money in the world. I think they're going to chase after Patrick Corbin too. But instead, they end up with the left-hander to pair up with Aaron Nola and Jake Arrieta in that rotation. Craig Kimbrell, I think, returns to the Boston Red Sox. He was up and down this season. Almost cost them the World Series, in theory, if he gives up that possible walk-off grand slam by Gary Sanchez. Don't forget, in Game 4 of the Yankees-Red Sox series last year, that it was bases loaded and nobody out, and the Yankees scored a couple runs, and then they had the bases loaded again. Gary Sanchez is up. He hits the ball, and it almost went over the left field fence, but instead it ends up in Andrew Benintendi's glove. And if that goes over the fence, then we're probably talking about somebody else winning a World Series. Maybe the Yankees, maybe Houston, maybe the Dodgers, but certainly not the Red Sox, because maybe the Yankees win the Game 5. Or maybe the Red Sox do win that Game 5 in Fenway Park, but certainly the postseason for Craig Kimbrell would have been hurt more if he had given up a grand slam to Gary Sanchez in that spot. And he almost gave up a big hit in the Astros series that could have lost him that series, but Andrew Benintendi made the great play in left field. But that said, I think Kimbrell goes back to Boston as they try to improve their bullpen by bringing back one of their better relievers. Yasmani Grandal is the best catcher on the free agent market. A lot of people speculated that he was going to sign with the Nationals, but Kurt Suzuki signed with the Nationals today on a 2-year deal. I did not have Yasmani Grandal penciled into the Washington Nationals before the Kurt Suzuki signing, so that's good. I had him penciled in and still think that he'll sign with the Chicago White Sox. They have money, and I think they want to be better. They tried last year, but they turned out to be a disappointment last year. I think they're dark horses for Bryce Harper and Manny Machado, and they certainly have needed an upgrade at the catcher position for years now, and Grandal will be a nice offensive upgrade at that position. Nathan Eovaldi, I think, will return to the reigning World Series champion Red Sox. He was a big part of what they did in the playoffs, and certainly you could argue was the MVP of their playoff run, even though he was the losing pitcher in the 18-inning World Series Game 3. A.J. Pollock, this was a tough one for me. I don't think he goes back to Arizona. The team I think that signs him is the San Francisco Giants. They have a need in the outfield, and I think that's where he ends up, even though I think that the Giants could be sellers this offseason. J. Happ, I originally had him slotted to go back to New York, but the more I think about it, the more I think that they're looking to go big fish hunting. So I think he ends up signing with another contender in the American League, and that's the Houston Astros. I mentioned before how both Dallas Keuchel and Charlie Morton are free agents, and they lost Lance McCullers Jr. to Tommy John. So their only two starters that are locks right now are Justin Verlander and Garrett Cole. So let's give them J. Happ. Let's say he signs like a 3-year, $36 million contract with Houston. That'd be a nice fit. And then they, in theory, would get McCullers back in 2020. Michael Brantley. This was a tough call, too. I think he goes to the Texas Rangers, because I think they're trying to retool their roster a little bit. And that's a bit of a wild card this offseason. The Rangers, they're a team that can go out and spend and try to improve their team, or they're a team that could be a seller and trade off some pieces. But I think they bring in Brantley on maybe like a 1-year prove-it deal to see what he can do. Andrew McCutchen was traded from the Giants to the Yankees in the summertime after being traded from the Pirates to the Giants in the winter. I think he ends up going to the Washington Nationals. The Nationals always were interested in him. So I think McCutchen goes there and replaces Bryce Harper, in theory. So their outfield would be McCutchen, Victor Robles, and Juan Soto with Michael A. Taylor off the bench. Next up is Yusei Kikichi, Japanese free agent, the best Japanese free agent out there this year. I think he goes to the San Diego Padres. Because the Padres are always interested in those Japanese guys. They pursued Ohtani last year, but they failed, so I think they end up with Kikuchi. Josh Donaldson, I think, ends up to the Braves on a 1-year deal with an option for next year. I don't think Austin Riley is ready yet, so they get a stopgap for a year. And Donaldson, who's a veteran and has been on winning teams his whole career, and he certainly would help the Braves. Charlie Morton, this is a bit of a surprise prediction here. I have him going to the Oakland Athletics. Yes, they need starting pitching, and he'd be a nice fit in that rotation with Kenta Maeda hurt. They have Mike Fiers there. Right? He might actually be a free agent now that I think about it. But Morton would be a nice, above-average veteran on that team. Provide some leadership. He'd rebuild his value with the Astros. I think he'd be a nice fit in Oakland. Wilson Ramos, I have going to the Seattle Mariners after they traded away Mike Zunino. I think they have a need at catcher now, so Ramos will be the logical fit. Marwin Gonzalez, I don't think he goes back to Houston. They traded for Aledmys Diaz recently, so that signals that they don't think they're getting back Marwin Gonzalez. There's some speculation that he can end up on Minnesota or New York. I'm talking about the Yankees. But the team that I think that gets him is another contender, and that's the Cleveland Indians. That just seems like a logical fit. He can play all around the infield. He can play second. He can play third for them if needed, even a little bit of first base and outfield. Just feels like the perfect fit for the Indians and Terry Francona. Horaceous Familia, who was traded from the Mets to the A's last year, was a little up and down for Oakland. I think he goes to the Philadelphia Phillies. They have a need at relievers, so maybe he can close for them a little bit, and I could see them signing him to a 2-year deal or so. Zach Britton, I think, returns to the Bronx. I think he was a nice fit there, although it didn't really work out for him in that post-trade. Gave up so many big hits and home runs that really hurt the Yankees in games, but I think that he did also show the Zach Britton of old as well, and I think the Yankees will give him like a 2-year deal or so. David Robertson, I also believe will return to the Yankees. I know there's rumors that his agent wasn't getting along with the Yankees front office, but I think Robertson thrives with the Yankees, and he didn't really pan out with the White Sox as the White Sox hoped. So I'm sure he wants to be back in the Bronx, and it's just the perfect fit for him, and the fans just love him. Adam Ottavino, I believe, will sign with the New York Mets. The Mets have a need in their bullpen. Ottavino would be a nice fit. Nelson Cruz. I was tempted to pick the Astros here and make a case for them, but this feels like an Indians free agent signee to play in the outfield and DH a little bit, as they, in theory, move Edwin Encarnacion to first base. It would just be another big bat in that lineup. Jed Lowry, I think, will return to the Oakland Athletics, maybe on a 2-year deal or so. Young prospect Franklin Barreto really hasn't worked out, so I think they'll bring back Lowry. Andrew Miller, a lot of people think that he will return to the Bronx again. There's some people that think that he may go back to Cleveland or go back to Boston. Don't forget that he was a Red Sox originally. But I think he'll go to the Houston Astros. And that would be a great fit for that bullpen. And I really do think the Astros are poised to make some big moves this offseason after the way their season ended last year. Joe Kelly, I think, will sign with the Atlanta Braves. The Braves need some bullpen help. Clavin Herrera, I believe, will go to the Indians. I think he replaces Andrew Miller and Cody Allen in that bullpen. Gio Gonzalez, I think, will sign with the Oakland Athletics. They need some pitching, and I think Gonzalez will be a nice fit. Anibal Sanchez, great get for the Braves last year. I think will end up on the Milwaukee Brewers, who have a need in starting pitching. Matt Harvey, I believe, will return to the Cincinnati Reds after pitching pretty well for them last year. Trevor Cahill, I think, will sign with the Dodgers. The Dodgers need some relief help. I think he'll help them. Daniel Murphy, I believe, will return to the Washington Nationals. I think that the Nationals feel that they will still be competitive even though they're likely to lose Bryce Harper. And Murphy was just a great Nat, and those fans loved him there. Brian Dozier, I believe, will sign with the Los Angeles Angels. They have a need at second base after getting rid of Ian Kinsler at the trade deadline. DJ LeMahieu, this is a surprise prediction, but I think he signs with the Philadelphia Phillies. They have a lot of money. And after losing out on Machado, I think they get another infielder in LeMahieu to play second base for them. Joakim Soria, I also think he goes to the Philadelphia Phillies to help improve their bullpen. Their bullpen was a mess last year, especially when they collapsed down the stretch at the end of the year. Mike Moustakas, I think, will sign with the St. Louis Cardinals. I think that they can use him at third base. Lance Lynn, I think, will return to the Minnesota Twins. I think the Twins will be active and trying to be competitive again. Cody Allen, I believe, will sign with the Colorado Rockies. They seem to sign somebody's closer every year. And this year, I think it's Cody Allen. Nick Markakis, I believe, will return to the Atlanta Braves. He was a big part of that team last year, getting them to the LDS, and a big veteran in that locker room that will provide leadership. I think that's just a natural fit for him. Derek Collin, who had moments with the Giants this past year, I believe will go to the Tampa Bay Rays and serve as a little bit of an opener for them. Bud Norris, I believe, will sign with the Padres to help out their bullpen. Brad Brock, I believe, will go to the Boston Red Sox because they need some arms in that pen. Because I think a lot of those guys that helped them in the playoffs have kind of got hot at the right time, like a Ryan Brazier, people like that. Heath Henry, who I believe was left off one of their round rosters. So Brock could be a nice upgrade there. He'd replace Joe Kelly in that spot. Wade Miley, I believe, will go to the Pittsburgh Pirates. They can use some pitching. Garrett Richards, I believe, will return to the Angels after getting Tommy John surgery. I think they'll sign him to like a 1+1 type of deal. Jesse Chavez, I believe, will return to the Cubs after pitching well for them last year. Adam Jones, I believe, will return to Baltimore because that just makes too much sense. Martin Maldonado, I believe, will sign with the Milwaukee Brewers, who can use an upgrade behind the plate. I had Kurt Suzuki going to Boston, and I was going to propose a trade involving either Christian Vasquez or Sandy Leon going to a team that needs a catcher. But Kurt Suzuki ended up signing with the Washington Nationals today, as I mentioned before. Robinson Chirinos, I believe, will return to the Texas Rangers. That just makes too much sense, and he was a great fit there. Irvin Santana, I believe, will return to the Minnesota Twins. Just a good fit there. Drew Pomeranz, I believe, will go to the Tigers to try to rebuild his value a little bit. Asdrubal Cabrera, I believe, will go to the Colorado Rockies, who have a need at second base after, I believe, they'll lose DJ LeMahieu. Logan Forsythe, I believe, will go to the Pittsburgh Pirates. That's a nice spot for him. And Josh Harrison, I think, goes to the Boston Red Sox, who have a bit of a need at second base with Dustin Pedroia having his injury issues and whatnot. And Ian Kinsler is a free agent. Trades. I have a trade for every team. there are teams that are featured in this more than twice, and that's mostly because that they'd be teams that would be selling this offseason and some teams that are trying to win, per se. My first trade, the Arizona Diamondbacks will trade Paul Goldschmidt and Zach Greinke to the Houston Astros for Forrest Whitley, Yordan Alvarez, Corbin Martin, Framber Valdez, and Miles Straw. Great prospect haul. 2 top 5 prospects from the Astros system going to Arizona for a guy in a contract there in Goldschmidt and a guy in Greinke who they're dying to get rid of. And Greinke would help fill the void in that rotation left by Dallas Keuchel and Charlie Morton and the injury to Lance McCullers Jr. And then Goldschmidt is an upgrade over Yulieski Gurriel at first base. And I think Goldschmidt wants to be on a contender too, so that certainly helps. And so does Greinke, obviously. The Atlanta Braves trade away Touquet Toussaint, Luis Gohara, and Max Fried and Grayson Janista to the Seattle Mariners for James Paxton. The Braves are looking for an ace type of pitcher to go with their young core of pitchers, and I think Paxton would be a nice fit as the Mariners try to reboot a little bit. The Baltimore Orioles trade Mark Trumbo to the Chicago White Sox for Gavin Sheets and Ian Hamilton. White Sox, I think, are looking to make some improvements on their roster. I think that Trumbo would be a nice DH there. The Boston Red Sox deal Darwinzon Hernandez and Durbin Feltman to the Baltimore Orioles for Michael Givens. So 2 prospects go to Baltimore for Givens, in which Givens will be a part of this Red Sox bullpen overhaul. The Chicago Cubs trade Addison Russell, Oscar De La Cruz, and DJ Wilson to the Texas Rangers for Jurickson Profar. I think the Cubs are dying to get rid of Addison Russell after the domestic violence issue. And they sell low on him and attach him to 2 prospects to get Jurickson Profar, who really hasn't lived up to expectations with the Rangers. The Chicago White Sox trade Dan Dunning, Alec Hansen, Steele Walker, and Zach Birdie to the Arizona Diamondbacks for Robbie Ray. I think the White Sox, as I mentioned, are trying to get better. Michael Kopech's out next year with Tommy John surgery, so they try to get somebody in their rotation, and Ray, who I think will help them. The Cincinnati Reds trade Raciel Iglesias to the St. Louis Cardinals for Ryan Helsley, Justin Williams, and Junior Fernandez. Nice little haul for Cincinnati for a reliever who had a career year last year. Kind of reminded me of Aroldis Chapman, the way he pitches. So Iglesias, in theory, would become the Cardinals' new closer. The Cleveland Indians trade Carlos Carrasco to the Milwaukee Brewers for Corey Ray, Lucas Eckrig, Zach Brown, and Trey Supak. Nice package for Cleveland for one of their many above-average pitchers who I think they're looking to shop a little bit. I don't think they're going to trade all of them, but they'll trade some of them. The Colorado Rockies trade Ryan Rollison, Ryan Castellini, and Justin Lawrence to the New York Mets for Zach Wheeler. The Rockies are looking to improve their rotation. Wheeler had a great second half last year, and the Mets cash in his trade value. And Rollison will be a nice piece to get in return for Wheeler if you're the Mets. The Detroit Tigers trade Michael Fulmer to the Washington Nationals for Mason Denneberg, Seth Romero, Starling Sharp, and Jose Sanchez. I think that's a nice package for Fulmer for Detroit, as the Nats upgrade their rotation, as Fulmer would slide in as their number 3 starter behind Steven Strasburg and Max Scherzer. The Houston Astros trade Fredius Nova, Christian Javier, and Garrett Stubbs to the Arizona Diamondbacks for John Ryan Murphy. So these are 2 separate trades between these 2 teams. Like I said, the Diamondbacks are trying to reboot a little bit. Murphy had a career year for them last year. Astros have a needed catcher after Martin Maldonado leaves as a free agent. The The Kansas City Royals trade Whit Merrifield to the Los Angeles Dodgers for Gavin Lux, Mitchell White, and Tony Gonsolin. That's a great package for the Royals for Whit Merrifield as the Dodgers get their second baseman. Angels trade Jose Suarez, Jose Soriano, and Luis Pena to the New York Yankees for Sonny Gray. It's obvious that Brian Cashman wants to get rid of Sonny Gray. He was a disappointment in New York, so it'd be nice if Cashman can get something for Gray, who a lot of people like outside of Yankee Stadium, so I do think he'll get something for him, and those 3 arms would be a nice little package for Gray. The Los Angeles Dodgers trade Keibert Ruiz, Dennis Santana, Yadier Alvarez, and Drew Jackson to the Miami Marlins for JT Realmuto. It's obvious that JT Realmuto wants to win. He's made that clear. I think that the Dodgers and the Astros are in the driver's seat for Realmuto. I think the Dodgers are going to be more motivated after losing the World Series in back-to-back years. They're going to lose Manny Machado in free agency. Corey Seager's coming back. They brought back Clayton Kershaw, as we all knew would happen. Realmuto would be a great addition to that lineup and a very big upgrade over Yasmani Grandal. The Miami Marlins trade Starlin Castro to the Minnesota Twins for Luis Arraez and Tyler J. Minnesota needs a second baseman. They're losing Logan Forsythe in free agency. Castro would be a nice fit. The Milwaukee Brewers trade Cody Ponce and Aaron Ashby to the Toronto Blue Jays for Marco Estrada. Nice add to their rotation. He's cited as like their number 3 or number 4 guy. So in theory, I have them trading for Carrasco, who would be their number 1. And then they have Jimmy Nelson coming back. And then they have Marco Estrada. And then they have a couple of, like, Brandon Woodruff they could try in their rotation. And Corbin Burns. The Minnesota Twins trade Zach Little and John Curtis to the San Francisco Giants for Jeff Samardzija. I think the Giants are going to blow it up a little bit, and they want something for Samardzija. They're dying to get rid of him, and the Twins need some pitching. This is a bit of a surprise here, although you're hearing a little bit of rumors over the last couple of days. I just have a gut feeling this is going to happen because the team that makes this deal, I think, overpays. The New York Mets trade Noah Syndergaard to the San Diego Padres for Mackenzie Gore, Chris Paddock, Anderson Espinoza, and Josh Naylor. That is a fantastic call for Noah Syndergaard, and the Mets can't pass that up because you have a possible future first base outfield type of guy in Josh Naylor. Mackenzie Gore could be an ace. Anderson Espinoza has some upside. And you have Chris Paddock, who is a top 100 prospect as well. So that is a fantastic call for Thor, and I think the Mets should jump on a deal like that. And that is what I call an overpay by the San Diego Padres. The New York Yankees trade Clint Frazier, Justice Sheffield, Albert Abreu, and Luis Medina to the San Francisco Giants for Madison Bumgarner. Listen, I think they're going to try for Jacob deGrom. The Mets will obviously say no. They'll try for Noah Syndergaard. The Mets will say no. No way the Mets are trading with the Yankees. No way. I don't think the Wilpons will allow that. They're going to try for Corey Kluber. I don't think the Indians want to deal him to one of the American League contenders. That's why I have Carrasco going to the National League. I don't think Cleveland wants to trade with Boston or New York or Houston in any deal or anybody in their division. So they turn to San Francisco and overpay for Madison Bumgarner, who's in a contract year. And I think he'd be a great addition to that rotation. And I think Bumgarner on a contender would be motivated a la Justin Verlander in 2017 with Houston. I think Bumgarner would thrive with the Yankees. And in a rotation with him, Patrick Corbin, Luis Severino, and Masahiro Tanaka can go head-to-head with anybody in the American League. And with Houston, with my projected additions with Happ and Greinke, that go with Verlander and Garrett Cole. And then Cleveland still, despite my trade projections, would have a solid rotation with Corey Kluber, Shane Bieber. I think Tristan McKenzie finally will get a crack in that rotation. You have Mike Clevenger there and Trevor Bauer, and that's a great rotation. In Boston, I have Nathan Eovaldi going back there, David Price rejuvenated, Chris Sale, obviously, and Rick Porcello and Eduardo Rodriguez. So that'd be a great foursome with CC Sabathia as your number 5 starter to go head-to-head with the other American League contenders. So Madison Bumgarner would be an amazing addition in pinstripes. And that's a trade I predicted before the start of last season. I got mocked for it. And nobody told me, or nobody tried to convince me that it was happening, but it was just my surprise prediction that really didn't work out this season. But I did say in that preseason prediction piece last year, or I should say, not piece, podcast last year, that if Bumgarner wasn't traded at the deadline, then he'd be traded in the offseason. And now the Giants have a new GM, and they came out with something recently for next year that's like bobbleheads, and Madison Bumgarner wasn't included. What does that tell you? That means that they're looking to trade him. So, yeah, Bumgarner to the Yankees. Let's see if that actually happens this time around. The Oakland Athletics trade James Kaprielian and Grant Holmes to the San Francisco Giants for Mark Melancon. The Giants continue what I believe will be a teardown as they get 2 high upside arms for their closer. So Melancon and the A's bullpen would replace Jerez Familia. The Philadelphia Phillies trade Scott Kingery and Carlos Santana to the Tampa Bay Rays for Tyler Glasnow, Nick Solak, and Austin Franklin. It's obvious that the Phillies are trying to dump Carlos Santana. He really didn't pan out with Philadelphia. He's more suited as a DH rather than a first baseman. Tampa Bay needs a DH. Carlos Santana fits. Scott Kingery fits with Tampa too as like a utility type of player. Tyler Glasnow hasn't really panned out, and I can see Tampa moving on from him, and he'd be a nice high upside guy that trot out in either their rotation or in their pen, whatever Philadelphia would like to do. And Nick Solak and Austin Franklin are just throw-ins in that trade. The Pittsburgh Pirates trade Cole Tucker, Calvin Mitchell, and Stephen Jennings to the Seattle Mariners for D. Gordon. Mariners are trying to blow it up, and I think D. Gordon is very available. Pirates haven't needed second base. D. Gordon is a second baseman by trade, not an outfielder, and Pittsburgh loses Josh Harrison, so they go out and get D. Gordon. And I have them signing Logan Forsythe too, but I think they'd use Forsythe in more of a utility role rather than just strictly a second baseman. The San Diego Padres trade Luis Patino, Buddy Reed, and Eusteri Ruiz to the Toronto Blue Jays for Brandon Drury. The Padres have a need at third base. Vlad Guerrero Jr. is the third baseman of the future for the Toronto Blue Jays, not Brandon Drury. Drury still has trade value. He was a disappointment a little bit last year with his injuries. So Toronto cashes in an asset and gets some prospects in return. The St. Louis Cardinals trade Randy Arozarena, Edmundo Sosa, and Jake Woodford to the Cleveland Indians for Jason Kipnis. Yes. This is, I think, going to be one of the more surprising moves of the offseason. Cleveland made it known that everybody's available except for Francisco Lindor and Jose Ramirez. I don't think they'll trade Corey Kluber. I think Jason Kipnis is the most surprising Indian traded this offseason. Kipnis can play second base for the Cardinals. I think that they low-key want to move on from Colton Wong somehow or make him like a utility bench type of player. Paul DeYoung's their shortstop. I have them signing Mike Moustakas to play third. Jed Jerko's another utility guy that they can play at first base. And same with Jose Martinez. As the Indians cash in on what I would say is a declining asset. The San Francisco Giants trade Brandon Belt to The Minnesota Twins for Brent Rooker, Gilberto Castellino, and Cole Stewart. Nice package for San Francisco for a guy that I think that they should cash in on. And the Twins have a need at first base. Joe Mauer retires. Belt would be a nice fit, as I think the Twins are actually going to do a little bit of win now sort of moves. Because they see that the Indians are trading people away. I think them and the White Sox are the two teams from the AL Central. They're going to try to rush it a little bit this offseason. The Seattle Mariners trade Kyle Seager to the Milwaukee Brewers for Bryce Terang, Mauricio Dubon, and Caden Lemons. I originally had that package going to Minnesota for Miguel Sano, but I changed my mind and went with Kyle Seager instead. The Mariners made it clear that everybody's available except for Mitch Haniger, Marco Gonzalez, and Edwin Diaz. Although I do think they should trade Gonzalez if they trade Paxton. But that would be a nice package for Seager, who I think is a declining player a little bit. Tampa Bay trades Shane Baz, Anthony Banda, and Joe McCarthy to the Cleveland Indians for Danny Salazar. The Rays need a number 2 or 3 type of pitcher. They go with Blake Snell. Salazar will be a nice gamble for them. The Texas Rangers trade Shin-Soo Choo to the Colorado Rockies for Sam Hilliard, Ben Bowden, and Brian Mundell. The Colorado Rockies have a need in their outfield. They really only have David Dahl and Charlie Blackmon out there. They've been playing a lot of Gerardo Parra in left field, but he's a free agent. Choo would be a nice addition for them. He could play right, he could play left. He could even play a little bit of first base, because they sort of have a need there, as the Rangers cash in on an asset who has an onerous contract. The Toronto Blue Jays trade Russell Martin to the Atlanta Braves for Freddie Tarnok and Alex Jackson. I almost pegged Martin to Washington, but they ended up signing Kurt Suzuki, so I changed it to Atlanta. Atlanta has a need at catcher after losing Kurt Suzuki. Martin being a nice fit with that young pitching staff. And Alex Jackson's another catcher that the Braves have in their system. Although Toronto has the catcher of the future in Danny Jansen, so it makes sense for them to cash in on Martin. The Washington Nationals trade Nick Raquette and David Ward to the Cincinnati Reds for David Hernandez. So 2 assets go to Cincinnati for one of their better relievers from last year, as the Nats, like I said, try to reboot a little bit to keep themselves competitive in the NL East. Last but not least, my best bet of the night. It's sponsored by FanDuel. 17 parlay, moneyliner. The Rams, the Pistons, the 76ers, the Clippers, the Grizzlies, the Bucks, and the Pelicans. Plus 763 to win, $7.63, with a payout of $8.63. The only one that scares me of this group really is the Rams. Maybe they missed Cooper Kupp a little bit more than I thought, and their defense is worse than the Chiefs, at least for tonight, but you never know. Let's hope I get this right. And that's it for today. I'll be back tomorrow recapping Monday Night Football, NBA, NHL, college hoops, do my guest lines for NFL Week 12, Thanksgiving week, and tomorrow I'll be starting a mini series with Thanksgiving this week. I'm going to be doing best memories of every sports team and why fans should be thankful. I hope you guys have a great day, everybody.